Welcome to Business Talk Sister Gawk. I'm Becca.
And I'm Ruthie.
And today we are super excited to have Bridger Hopkins with us. Just so you guys know, Bridger has been someone that I have admired for a long time because he's a serial entrepreneur. And one of the youngest experiences I had with entrepreneurship was just watching him with his different business endeavors. And so he's been doing it for a long time, and we're super excited to hear a little bit about the things that he's been doing more recently and hear the story about how he got there. Bridger, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So my full-time gig is I work at a paper company, but kind of on the side, I'm always working on some sort of project, I guess you could say. Some of my recent ones have been AirB&B, as well as been building and flipping houses, and those projects keep me pretty busy.
So how did you start this process? Where were you getting interested in business, and what was your journey to get there?
Yeah, so my dad's always been an entrepreneur. He's an electrician, but he's got his own contractor. He's a contractor. He's got his own company. They've owned 5-6 different restaurants over the years. My parents have. And so I've always grown up kind of in that atmosphere where you're thinking about business, thinking about, how you can monetize something, looking at customers you can serve. And so that was really helpful for me as a kid. It even allowed me to kind of venture out when I was a kid and doing some of my own little projects.
So what did that look like it seems like there's a decent lower risk level of having your parents help with that, and how influential were your parents in encouraging you to pursue different business ventures?
My parents were always very supportive of stuff I took on. One thing that I've always had a bent towards was, if there's something I enjoy doing, how can I do it for free? Or how can I, somewhat monetize a hobby that I enjoy, so that, it's not just somewhere that I dump money into. And so as a kid, I really enjoyed raising chickens, ducks, a whole menagerie of different critters. And so my parents were maybe reluctantly supportive of that. But what that ended up growing into was, selling eggs on the side, and eventually growing into selling chickens for meat. So and that was probably a 4 or 5 year process for me, starting out with, hey, I've never, raised a chicken for meat. So I started with, I wanted to have some for us, just our family. And I went through and did a lot of research on what I needed to do. And then I figured out, how much food, how much time. And then I figured how many chickens, if I raised above and beyond what we wanted, how many I would need to raise and sell to cover the costs for our chickens. So that's kind of how it started. Because I didn't want to, put up all the money just to have some chicken to eat, as an 11-year-old or 12-year-old. And so that's kind of where it began. And then it eventually went from, I think it was like 25 birds to 50 to 150. And then I think in the last year, it raised over 260 birds.
Oh, wow. Buckets.
Yeah, that's a lot of chickens. And so, and that whole time I did have the support of my parents, of I was able to recruit my grandfathers a few times to help butcher chickens.
Wow.
And so I had a lot of backup, but that always, those experiences really played into, probably more so a way of thinking, how can I monetize this thing that I enjoy, or this thing that I want to do? And even from there, there's a big difference from having 25 chickens to 260 chickens. So coming up with systems, changing the way I was purchasing, my materials, my actual chickens, the food, all of that, looking to buy in bulk, finding different vendors, all that sort of stuff. And that's where I kind of got my first exposure, really.
So what made you transition then from doing all these chickens to all of a sudden being like, okay, I'm going to try rentals and property?
Yeah. So it started again in probably middle school. It must have been middle school, early high school. Ruthie will probably like this, but I started listening to the Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University. At the time, I think it was at that time it was 14, but we just had the audio, 14 sessions. And so we listened to those with my dad. And the one that really stuck out, well, probably two things that stood out was, going to school without having any debt, and then also the real estate. And I kind of saw that real estate lesson as a way to, maybe leverage my education in a way that, I wouldn't have to pay for it or not even out of pocket, but, using loans. So really looked at, buying a foreclosure house, something that was relatively inexpensive, put some sweat equity into it, have a place to stay while I went to school, and then even, upon selling, be able to pay for the continuance of my education.
So that was your first buy, was one that you would stay in while you were at college?
Yeah. So in my senior year of high school, my dad and I went in on purchasing a house that was foreclosed on, and right in town in northern Minnesota. I had made plans already to go to the community college, Itasca Community College. So I kind of had my plans somewhat laid out, at least for a few years. So that senior year, quit basketball and went to town on working on this house.
Wow.
Pretty much remodeling the whole thing. I was tiling bathtub surrounds at 4 in the morning before going to school, and
wow,
heading there after work or after school. And so we started that in September, and I moved in June after after graduated. And from that point I had roommates. We actually built an apartment in the basement. So I think I actually moved 3 times in the house, from the second floor to the basement, back to the second floor, just kind of depending on the arrangements I had for roommates or renters. And that was really my first taste of renting. And that can definitely be interesting.
Yeah. So this is like, you're a senior in high school, and you made this huge sacrifice to quit basketball, and your life is kind of looking different than most of your peers, I imagine. So what were their responses to that? What kind of comments did you get from people that you went to high school with?
A lot of weird looks. A lot of people thought it was, really cool that, you were doing that. And, but I don't think a lot of people could really comprehend or why are you doing that? I think a lot of people have the belief that they want to go to school, go off somewhere else, get out of town. And at that point, I was pretty much cementing that I was going to be, at least for a few more years, be in my hometown. And so I think even on a base level like that, some people couldn't really compute the reason for me doing that. Not taking out loans, not having to leverage myself that way.
And were you able to pay, just out of curiosity, were you able to pay for school without loans?
Yeah. So I lived at that house for 2 years while I was going to ICC. And like I said, I had the whole gamut of good renters, bad renters, good roommates to not so good roommates. And yeah, I ended up at the end of the 2 years, I had gotten married and moved out to Idaho to go to University of Idaho, go Vandals. And we sold the house, and it ended up paying for we had made it through 2 years already of school, paid for our 3rd year, and then worked our way through the last bit. And yeah, we never took out a loan. We each had 3 jobs, 2 to 3 jobs at any given time.
Wow.
but yeah, I made it through.
So tell me a little bit about when so you started your chicken business. It sounds like you learned a lot about how to research during that time and know how to make an investment that's profitable. And then when you're living with these people, you're starting to learn a whole lot about what makes a good roommate or a renter. What was the processes that you started setting in place for your rental properties, and how did you go through researching how much to charge, that kind of stuff? How did you get through that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like starting with the chickens, it was nice because it was already sort of a hobby. So I had a base level of knowledge I felt pretty comfortable with. I think by the time, well, I probably didn't calculate very well with the labor involved, but again, it was kind of a labor of love, I guess you could say, at least for me, maybe not those who were helping me, but then going in where I really had a lot of, this is probably a good way to say it, a lot of good opportunity to learn would be when I started doing the rentals, or renting out, having roommates, all of that. Initially I started with people I knew, and I don't think I like that. You just because you know someone, sometimes it can be different to enter into in this case, it's pretty much a business agreement with them where you're gonna give them a place to stay, and they're gonna, give you money. And so I wasn't always too upfront about, getting a security deposit or making sure they had their act together, have their backgrounds put together. So I got burned a few times right away, where people I knew thinking that I could really trust them, and then it not really being the case. So since then, now I get, maybe my perspective has changed, as I have to bend over backwards to give them a spot. I'm providing this all out service, and really that's not the case for rentals, in my opinion. You're giving them a good product, but you have your standards that you have to hold. So my last place that I rented out was a house that we built, and I did first month, last month, and then 1 month for security deposit. So it's before the person gets to move in, they've got 3 months essentially of rent. So I know that they're, and they've passed a background check and a credit check. The resource that I use for going through that is cozy.com.
Okay.
And that's a really good, I really liked using that. It's a good way for people to pay using their bank accounts, and doing the background checks, facilitating all of that. And that's really nice. But yeah, there has been a definite change in my mindset.
How did you make that transition to Airbnb? Was it you use the same properties that you already had? You purchased new ones? How did you prepare for that?
So for right now, I've got we have one Airbnb unit, and it's currently in the home we live in. It's our third floor. We have an external entrance that gets up to our staircase, or a staircase that goes up to the third floor. And it's pretty much a hotel accommodation. It's got a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchenette. Okay. And that's where it's that's a totally different mindset, at least the way I look at it, that's where you do kind of go a little more out of your way to provide a very nice service for these people who are going to be staying with you. We bought this house with that in mind, as far as being able to use that space as an Airbnb. And really even the genesis of that is, we've stayed in Airbnbs across the country and across the world, and we've really liked it being guests. So we wanted to see what it would be like to be hosts.
And how did you prepare for that physically? Like, did you have to do are there a lot of legal requirements that you have to do for Airbnb to certify you as a place to stay? Did you have to do a lot of updating? What did you do with that?
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy, maybe, to become an Airbnb host. I thought it would be more difficult than it was. So it's got a pretty low barrier to entry, which is nice. but and you can be really flexible with what you're going to offer people. You can technically offer somebody your garage and a inflatable mattress, and if there's a demand for that, someone might pay you $10, but it all depends on what you're looking to offer. For us, there was no kitchenette sort of space. We kind of took over a closet that was up there. I made that our kitchenette, put in some more power, some appliances, and then I had to do some work on the staircase to get upstairs, finish that out to make it look a lot nicer, and then otherwise, we've got furniture up there, make sure it was clean, and we were ready to go.
So when you were looking at different updates and stuff and figuring out, okay, this is how much we charge or whatever, within that, how did you decide on like what's worth it and what's going to be profitable? Has it been profitable overall to look at those different aspects?
Yeah, that's really good. For me personally, my initial instinct is like, hey, I got to make this place. I have to update it. I've got to do new flooring. I got to do new paint, new trim, all that. My wife helps temper me, so she keeps me in check. We're a good team. So she recommended we just see if we can rent it out as it is. See if there are people that want the space. It's not bad, but it's not what I would like it to be. But by holding back, have less cost on the startup, which has been really, really good for us. So we're really I think we were probably $2,000 into starting up between getting furniture and the few updates that I had to do. So there was some cost getting set up.
Okay. Yeah. So I know we have a little bit of time left and we wanted to just transition into our Gawk portion. I know that you gave us a lot of really valuable information. But before we do that, is there any resources that you would recommend to someone who's looking to start up? Like what kind of either links or anything that you said, these were really valuable to me. I would recommend looking into this before getting started.
So probably if you're looking to start an Airbnb, probably the most important resource is going to be Airbnb itself. You're going to want to set up an account and then look at the area where you're in or where you'd be looking to start up on Airbnb. Look to see how many places are being supported right now. What's their pricing? What are they offering? What do you have that you can offer that might be different than them? And so I even still spend a lot of time on Airbnb checking what's in our area. For me, we're a little bit out of the main drag, I guess you could say, and kind of the niche that I'm looking to fill is I have the cheapest place that is where you have your own space. So you're not sharing a house or sharing any space with someone. And then I also offer one-night stays, whereas most places require 2-night minimums. So that's kind of where I'm looking to position myself. So look at Airbnb, there's tons of stuff on YouTube, lots of articles online, and that's just where I would begin.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So the last thing we're going to do is gawk about something. And Bridger was already talking to us a little bit before we started. For you guys who didn't see him today, I was a little surprised. He shaved his head. And I was not expecting that. And he was telling us about his sunburn experience. And you guys got to hear this story. So if you want to take it away, go for it.
Yeah, so shaving my head was kind of the, coronavirus lockdown last it was easy haircut that I can manage. So it kind of reminded me the first time that I realized I did have a receding hairline. My since especially now that I'm having to rub sunscreen all over my whole head. But my wife and I went on our honeymoon to Mexico, and I got a haircut. I wanted to look nice, and first morning on the beach, I was throwing sunscreen on, and I did one nice pass across my forehead, and which had worked at when I was a kid, but I missed the two little half moons on the top of my forehead. I applied the sunscreen, and that first day, my head got fried. And so, that was the first time I realized that my hairline was in fact receding. So to add insult to the injury of the sunburn, I realized I was losing my hair. So.
And I'm just imagining like you have like a decent widow's peak, and then on the sides you have these two little half moons of red that look like Mickey Mouse ears.
Oh yeah, it was all of that. It was pretty bad. Needless to say, I didn't forget sunscreen the rest of the trip.
Yeah, and I suppose being down in a southern climate too, it's quite the transition from northern Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bridger, for joining us this week. It was so fun to hear your wisdom and experiences that you've had in your life. Thank you so much for joining us, listeners. Just send our podcast to a friend of yours this week, and we will see you again next week.